Well, welcome to J385 Communication Law for spring 2020. I'm Tim Gleason, and this is the first module of many for the course. We're going to have a good term this spring. We know that it's crazy. We know that everyone is in unusual circumstances, to put it mildly, and I think the first thing I just want to say to you all is that everybody should stay safe. And we're going to work our way through this term. It's something of an experiment for all of us. And so we're all going to work our way through the term to make sure that you all have a good experience, and I have a good experience, and at the end of the day, that you walk out in 10 weeks with knowledge of communication law and having had a good term. So this is the first module, and before we continue with this module, I want you to download and print the class syllabus or have it available on your computer in any case, because we're going to walk through the syllabus a little bit, not a whole lot of time, but we're going to walk through it, and I want to make sure that you have it in front of you. So, and as I just said a second ago, let's all understand this is a test. This is the first time we're going to run through the course in a fully online module, or a fully online mode, I should say. And we're going to have some bumps and bruises and go up and down and get it right sometimes and not get it right some other times. But if we all work together, we can make sure we have a good term. So what I want to do today is walk through the syllabus and then talk a little bit about what we're doing in this course. What are the things we care about and focus on in communication law? So as I said, I'm Tim Gleason. My contact information is here in front of you. I will have online office hours, probably using Zoom. But we'll come to that in the next module. And my office hours. We have two GEs in the course, Ilana Amavor and Rachel Quick. They will both have an opportunity to introduce themselves to you as we get into the course. And again, we have some of their office hours. Rachel's office hours are up there. Ilana's are not yet, but will be soon. We're all going to hold online office hours. And so you'll have an access to talk to us. We're also going to have discussion sections or sessions in the class time where we can have discussion. So the text is Hopkins Communication Law 2020. As I noted in emails to you earlier, it's available from the bookstore. It's available from Amazon. You can get free shipping from the bookstore. Hopefully you have ordered the book. If not, you need to do it immediately. One of the things I'd like is a little feedback from people, whether you have actually gotten the book, and if not, we may put a couple of chapters up so that you have access to them. But Communication Law 2020, we're going to have on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 12 to 1:20. We're going to have online sessions. Again, probably using big blue button in Canvas, and we'll have an opportunity to have some conversation, to have some discussion. The lectures that I'm doing as you're reading this course, and these modules will be available, posted on the Canvas site, and you'll have access to them at any time. And once we'll record the sessions, the Tuesday, Thursday sessions as well, and they will also be available on Canvas. As noted, it's our primary site. Make sure you're using it, and make sure that obviously, if you're watching this, you're using it, so continue to. So there are a bunch of things in the syllabus that I want you to take a look at. Inclusive learning environment, vigorous discussion of opinion, the grading policy, which we'll talk about in a second, our course objectives. Again, we'll talk about attendance. Let me note that mandatory attendance requirements have been waived for this term. However, as you will see, there are some extra credit benefits for you to be in the sessions that we're going to have during the regular class times, and other things that are listed here that you should look at in the syllabus. I'm not going to spend time on them in this module. We can certainly talk about them when we get into discussion sections. Requirements for the course, and this is open to a little bit of revision as we get into this and we figure out what's actually going to work best. Right now, the plan is that there'll be 3 quizzes, there'll be a final exam, there'll be a final paper proposal, and there will be a final paper. And then a couple of discussion papers, and the way that actually works out is that the discussion paper is related to your final paper, And the papers are not long. The final paper is a 6 to 8 page paper. What we're interested in is trying to get you to think a little bit about some of the issues we're going to be talking about. And again, we'll get into this in much more detail in the next couple of modules. So there are 450 points in sort of required assignments and quizzes. In addition to that, there is the potential to get up to 90 points of extra credits. 40 points for making a presentation during one of our discussion sections on a current legal issue, which we will get into shortly. And not today, but in one of the second or third module. 20 points for participation in class discussions. And this is available to all students who really bring their game to our discussions. So not everybody gets it, but you can get up to 20 points. Theoretically, everyone can get it, but not likely. Then there is 20 points for if we have recorded attendance for you at more than 50% of the class sessions, you'll get 20 points of extra credit. If you have recorded attendance at more than 75% of the class sessions, you'll have 30 points of extra credit. So that's a total of potentially of 540 points. And there are 450 points on the grading scale. So what that breaks down to is a grade point value of that you can see here. And as you can see, it breaks down 451 or better, you get an A+, et cetera, all the way down the line. Generally speaking, in this course, when I've taught it before, and I've been teaching it for nigh on to 30 years now, the average grade is generally about a B. And I hope that's the case this term as well. We're going to take into account this is a new experience for all of us, but we're going to, try to work on about the same sort of grading scale I've used in the past, and we'll see how that goes. So again, if you have questions about this, we can talk about them during the discussion sections. So this is what, as you look down in the syllabus, you'll see that every week, and we continue to break this down in terms of weeks through the quarter. Every week you will see assignments like this one. This is week 1. So the textbook, the readings in that textbook, we want you to read chapters 1 and 2. I'd like you to look at the Constitution of the United States, especially the Bill of Rights. And those are in the book. Excuse me. They're also available online, and the URL is here. And then there will be modules. And the modules that I want you to look at, and they're not on this slide, but are the first 3 modules on Canvas. This being one of them, and then modules 2 and 3. So hopefully you'll have read those before we get to the next, before you get into the next module. Actually, you reviewed them. So what's the course about? Well, first, constitutional protection for freedom of speech and the press. That's really kind of the foundation of this course. That's what we really focus on. I mean, everything is, we talk about a lot of different areas of law, but what we're really looking at are these questions of the constitutional protection. What speech is protected? How do we define speech? And then how much of it do we protect, and why do we protect it? Why did the framers of the Bill of Rights, the authors of the Oregon State Constitution, why did they include provisions protecting expression? Why do we think this is a fundamental right that needs to be protected? For who and for what are we protecting it? Then how do we understand it? How do we interpret and understand state and federal laws? These laws that define what those legal protections are, how do we make sense out of those? How do we understand them? And then, and this is a critical piece of this course, and why most of you are in this course, what's all this mean to you as a communication professional? How do these laws shape the world in which you work on a day in and day out basis? If you're in advertising, how does the fact that commercial speech is treated differently than political speech change the environment in which you work? If you're a journalist and you want to get access to information, how do these protections give you access to information, allow you to see documents, allow you to get into spaces, and why is access to some documents not allowed? Why are you protected if someone accuses you of libel? How do we, as in people living in an increasingly digital world, how do we protect our privacy? How do we make sure that images that we don't want out in the public are not out in the public? How do we make sure that our financial information is properly protected? So what does all this mean to you as a communication professional and simply as a citizen? What do freedom of speech and freedom of the press mean to you, and how do they shape your life, whether it's your life as a professional, your life as a citizen in the United States? So those are the kinds of questions we're going to look at across the course of the term, and try to make sense out of them. And what I hope in this course is that you come out of it with not only with a better understanding of the law, but also with an understanding of how to make sense out of the things that you're reading, the things that you're hearing, the things that are being reported. How can you, as a user of information, be a more powerful user of information? How can you use it to better enable you to make sense out of the law and put it to good use? So, a couple of questions that we're going to look at, a couple of recent developments that will come into our discussion through the course of the term. State of California at the beginning of this year had a new privacy law that went into effect, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And if you want to take a look at it, here's the URL. I might note that because I'm using, why am I blanking on the name? It's not PowerPoint. Keynote. Because I'm using Keynote in this these presentations, for some reason or other, if I embed the link, you can't see the link. So anyway, this is the link to that particular bill, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And what's it about? It's about protecting data privacy. What information can businesses collect about you, and how can they use it? All right, so we'll look at that as we go through the term. This is something from last fall. Oregon's public records czar abruptly resigns after just 18 months on the job, cites abuse of authority. Ginger McCall hired to further Governor Kate Brown's goal of making Oregon's government more transparent. She says Brown's staff pressured her in ways that were, quote, unethical. Well, what's that about? Well, it's all about access to information in the state of Oregon, and to what extent the government is going to facilitate that access, and to what extent is the government going to stand in the way of that access. She was advocating for a bill. That bill, this fall, or this winter rather, was headed to the Oregon legislature. It had been adopted by the Senate, was headed to the House, at which point Oregon's legislature had a meltdown. So we'll talk about that. You can go look at the public records website of the Oregon legislature right there. There's the URL. And this is a whole question of access to information. So FOIA, access to federal information, and then access to public records held by state governments and to public facilities operated by federal or state governments. Access to information. Last October, Sports Illustrated, what's next after California signs Game Changer Fair Play to Play Act into law? Well, what's that about? All right. Well, for those of you who follow college sports, you know that this is all about NIL, name, image, and likeness. And as Sports Illustrated reported at that time, the act is a game changer. It makes it illegal to deny student athletes opportunities for the use of their name, image, and likeness. Well, that's a legal concept that we're going to spend some time talking about. It's called the right of publicity. To what extent can the NCAA prohibit student athletes from profiting off their name, image, and likeness? From whether it's doing a commercial, whether it's becoming an influencer, whatever it might be, how can you profit from the right of publicity, the fame, the value of the fame of your name, image, or likeness. Well, that was that was October, and that's the bill, SB 206 out of California. So a couple of distinctions just to kind of highlight kind of the things we want to look at in this course. So it stops, the NCAA has rules that don't allow student athletes to earn compensation, all right? So that they can't get paid for activities having to do with their name, image, and likeness. How's that different from a scholarship? What's the difference between earning compensation and getting a scholarship? Well, legally they're very different. And that's one of the things I want you to focus on this term, is understanding those kinds of differences. What's the difference between a scholarship and a paycheck? Why does that matter? Does it matter? Should it matter? All right. Just understanding these distinctions within the law, I think it's an important thing for all of us to understand, whether we're talking about college athletics or whether we're talking about any other number of things we might be talking about. Bud Light commercials, brewed with no corn syrup. Well, what's that mean, brewed with no corn syrup? And why do we care? Well, that's commercial speech. If it were a political ad, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We're having it because it's commercial speech. So I want you to watch these two ads, this Bud Light ad and this Miller Lite ad. I want you to watch those ads before you go any further in watching this module. And then I want you to come back to the module. So go watch the ads and come back. Well, you've watched these two ads. You've seen a bunch of claims being made in them, humorous ads, pretty creative. More taste, half the carbs. Well, more taste is what's called a puffing claim. You know, what does it mean to be more taste? It goes back, there was a famous, there are many number of commercials over the years. More filling, tastes better, more filling, less light, whatever it might be. So there's more taste, that's a puffing ad, puffing claim. Not necessarily have to prove that. Half the carbs of Bud Light. Well, if you think that's important, I don't know, but you have to prove it. The advertiser has to be able to show, in fact, indeed, there were half the carbs. So it's just an example of the kind of regulation that advertisers deal with that political speakers don't. They're not forced to prove, if you're a political speaker, you're not forced to prove the truth of your claim, whereas an advertiser has to substantiate the truth of a claim. Why? What's the difference between commercial speech and political speech? We'll look at it. These cases also, these kinds of claims also end up in court. So in this instance, in the case of Miller Coors versus Anheuser-Busch, excuse me, ends up in a court, and in fact, it's still in court. False and misleading, says contrary, there's no corn syrup in the final product and they don't use high fructose corn syrup. So it goes back to that original ad that I was showing you. What do they actually say in that ad? What is the truth? What is the claim being made? Okay, so we'll look at these as we go through the term. What's the implied meaning of the ads? Mark Zuckerberg, new rules for the internet. This was in now almost a year ago, where Mark Zuckerberg came out with it was an op-ed piece in the Washington Post. Said that we need to look at harmful content. We need to look at election integrity. We need to look at privacy. We need to look at data portability on the internet. So many of you, I'm sure, are aware to some degree of the great controversy around Facebook, Google, what have you, and the way they regulate or don't regulate content on the internet. It's an important question and one that we will look at. Clearly, Facebook has been running into difficulty with the federal government. FTC hits Facebook with $5 million fine and new privacy checks. That was 1919, last summer. A senator in September says Facebook should face possibility of a prison term. What's that about? Why should Mark Zuckerberg go to prison? Well, we're going to look at these questions towards the end of the term as to how do you regulate the internet, right, and why. New York State Attorney General also wants to look at whether Google is engaging in anti-competitive conduct. All right, so what's this all about? Well, the whole question to some degree is who owns the internet? And what we can see is that Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, or the FANG as they're sometimes called, control an alarming proportion of the internet. Facebook owns Instagram and WhatsApp. So Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook, all owned by the same company. 1 in 4 of all people in the world are using a service that's owned by Facebook. Alphabet owns Google, YouTube, and nearly 200 other companies. Amazon owns part of more than 100 companies in a wide variety of business. And one of the areas that we don't see on a regular basis, but they're a major internet provider service. I mean, they're providing storage space and other services to internet providers, dominating that field. Is this healthy for democracy? Does this create the kind of marketplace of ideas that we want to see if we have this enormous concentration of ownership and control of the internet? Have our public spaces, are they now essentially owned by private companies, and therefore they're not public spaces unless we're allowed to be on them? Right. Very important questions that are going to really dominate not so much this term, but that are going to dominate and have major influence on the world in which you all are going to work going forward. All right. This is really an offensive piece, but I thought it was worth showing it to you. This was a post, a racist post by a bunch of young men in Tennessee. It was on Snapchat. All right, and as you can see here, it's stupid racist. Question is, should such speech be protected or prohibited under the First Amendment? The question isn't, do we like it or not like it? The question is, should the government be able to stop it? Well, as Sean Harper, who's a scholar down at USC, wrote, "Blackface in the name of free speech is racism. There's no other name for it. College presidents and other leaders owe it to their black students and black employees to denounce and actively address this insidious form of racism." That's what Sean said about it. However, as Inside Higher Education reported, citing constitutional considerations, university officials have said they are unlikely to expel anyone over blackface. Administrators said that the First Amendment prevents them from removing the students. So how do we manage this? How do we deal with a world in which you have these kinds of offensive, hurtful statements, and at the same time you have a principle of free speech? Are these diametrically opposed? You know, how do we deal with this? How do we say, yes, we're going to protect speech that we don't like. We're going to protect speech that may be harmful to others. What's the right way to deal with this? Right. Very difficult question, one that we're going to look at in some detail. Last example, this is a case that's still ongoing involving Oberlin College, in which a college has been ordered to pay first $11 million, and then there was a $33 million judgment against them. So there was a flyer in which said that, quote, "A member of our community was assaulted by the owner of this establishment yesterday. Gibson's is a racist establishment with a long account of racial profiling and discrimination." So that was a flyer that came out of the university published by a student. Gibson's, which is a store in Oberlin, files a libel suit and wins it. $33 million judgment against Oberlin, in addition to the $11 million that was in the other headline. So $44 million judgment. Jury found that they defamed the business by siding with the protesters, awarded $33 million and 11. Punitive damages. What are punitive damages? Something for you to think about. We'll look at that, and you can find that in the book. Compensatory damages. What are compensatory damages? Why do you get those in a libel suit? What's the logic there? Well, Oberlin appealed in October. The case is still on appeal, as far as I know. And what they claim, first of all, they claim that Oberlin did not act with malice, only with negligence. That's what the jury found. Well, why is that important? What's the difference between malice and negligence, and where does that all fit into this? And then they argued, or the college argues, that holding the college legally responsible for the words of student protesters and the student government raises serious First Amendment concerns. So this is all in the area of libel law, a very complicated area that we're going to spend some time looking at later in the term. And again, it raises really interesting questions about the extent to which we want to allow the government to punish speech, to suppress speech, and who's responsible in a college situation. Are we, those of us who are faculty or are we responsible for student speech? And to what extent are we responsible? So we'll look at those cases. So just a couple of the things I've tried to highlight here. Why does the First Amendment provide less protection for commercial speech? Hate speech, libel, true threats, racist speech. When does speech become too harmful to protect? What should the standard be? How should we think about that? How should we make sense out of the need to protect speech and at the same time, the need to create inclusive communities where people feel, where everyone feels welcome? How do we tolerate speech? How do we balance those interests? How do we define privacy in the digital age, where we all give up information every day about our financial lives? Social media is full of shared information that 20 years ago would not have been shared publicly. Little kids who are growing up in front of our eyes online, in front of millions of people. What does it mean to have, what is private space in the digital age? How should the FANG be regulated? What do we do about Google and Facebook, etc.? Amazon. Have they gotten so big that we need to break them up, as Elizabeth Warren and others have argued? What do we do about that? Or don't we do anything at all? Just a small sample of the questions we'll explore this term. And I know I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the adventure of teaching this course online, fully online, and looking forward to your involvement in it, not just on the subject matter, but also in how we're going to deliver it and how are we going to best have a great experience over the course of the term. So this is, again, the first assignment, the first reading assignment, the modules that I want you to look at, modules 1, 2, and 3. I would urge you to look at those before you look at the slides, which will also be posted before our next lecture meeting, or in our first week of lecture meetings. So look forward to that, and see you again soon. What the hell? Are you kidding me? You tell me I didn't get any of that? moment about who I am. But just to give you an understanding of the course, the first thing I want you to do before you even go any further in watching the video is I want to make sure that you have downloaded the syllabus from the Canvas website. I'd encourage you to download the PDF so that you have it in front of you as you are watching this video. We're going to walk our way through the video, through the syllabus today, and this module is very much just a nuts and bolts discussion of the course and how it's structured and what we'll be doing over the course of the term. In Module 2, we will begin to talk in more detail about the kinds of issues that we're dealing with and why I think this is a really kind of a fun and exciting course. But on with the introduction. If you are on the wait list for this class, you'll note under the notes that WL means that this is a waitlisted course, and this screenshot is not from this current term, but as you can see, at that time the course was full. It may be